Bryan Kohberger, the Monroe County native, who's accused of stabbing and killing 4 University of Idaho students to death in their off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho, back in 2022. You probably have heard much about this case so far. It has been covered extensively in the national news. Bryan Kohberger has accepted a plea deal.
Back with this breaking news on the plea deal for Bryan Kohberger in the Idaho quadruple murder case, 2.5 years in and just 30 days, basically, till jury selection.
This was somewhat out of nowhere. Were there any indications that a plea deal might have been on the table? That was any indication that Kohberger would take it?
I certainly had not heard any information to indicate that a plea was being discussed, but that is frequently the case in sensitive cases, just as this one.
What might have led to this finally happening, especially so close to the trial?
Well, Lindsay, it was definitely a victory for the defense because there was a good chance that Kohberger was going to get the death penalty.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Well, breaking news, the entire true crime community felt a disturbance in the force yesterday when Bryan Kohberger, the current high-profile poster boy, decided to plead guilty. Now, I have to say, I've assumed that Bryan Kohberger reached this deal without the knowledge or consent of his own family. It will be interesting to know whether they actually pressured him into taking the deal. They obviously want their son to not die. And this was something we saw in the Chris Watts case as well, except in that case, the victims' families were consulted. In this case, I do think there was a real possibility that Kohberger could have faced the firing squad. But there have also been real issues from the prosecution side, leaks despite a gag order and a strenuous defense from Kohberger's side. Strenuous, I'm not really sure if it is particularly effective. The judge refusing to allow Kohberger his alternate suspects defense last week, I think, blew all the wind out of his sails. He had to have known he was going into a legal battle literally without any defense. But of course, that has been the reality all along. Kohberger would have liked to have had the option of a Karen Reed type defense, not accusing the police of his crimes, just other students. That was what he was going for. The judge found zero evidence justifying such a defense, and if you think about it, had he done so, Kohberger would have succeeded in re-victimizing additional students. Conspiracy theorists would have taken that baton and run with it, which would have ruined their lives as well. It just would have spread out the radioactive waste, in terms of this case, into real time, even further. So the real winner in this case is the University of Idaho, and the community of students there who would rather this case disappeared with a whimper rather than flooding the airways for weeks on end, certainly weeks on end, even leading up to the case, leading to ever more documentaries, books, and YouTube videos. Brian Enton on X said on Monday, "My personal feeling is from the beginning, Idaho has not wanted to deal with this case. From University of Idaho taking ownership of the house and tearing it down, to the initial judge passing the case on, to the gag order and constant annoyance with any attention that the case gets." Well, Judge didn't want to pass the case on, and who can blame the university for regarding this case as a radioactive cloud of toxic poison? I've actually been to the house, been to the grounds, and one really does have a sense that it is a total killjoy. And you might say, well, justice needs to be served. That's easy to say if you don't live in that town and you have this constant barrage of media and social media, and given how this case is dragged on. And so everything about it was bad for the students and the town. For me, it's been incredible how the media, including legal folks in the media, pounced on stories despite the gag order. It didn't affect their sensibilities in the least, when it really should have. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you find this analysis worthwhile, meaningful, resonates with you, please do hit the thanks button And let's continue.
He also said a month-long jury trial will impose an emotional, mental, financial, and physical toll on the families, friends, roommates of the victims without any certainty of an outcome. There would be some measure of finality if the defendant admits he was guilty of the murders. There is only one realistic way to get this type of closure, and that is through his entry of a guilty plea.
Now it seems at long last the tears Kohberger made in the fabric of the student society are being allowed to heal. Those stinging cuts are starting to sting a little less today. But not everyone is happy.
And tonight, her family posted on social media this statement that reads, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all your love and support." They feel like this is being rushed, with the plea expected to happen in a Moscow, Idaho court this Wednesday.
Well, there you have it. The family of Kaylee Gonzalez saying they're furious, and this is the statement on their Facebook family page. I would like to clarify a couple of things. We did talk to the prosecution on Friday about the possibility, in all caps, of a plea deal, and it was a hard no from our family. It was very nonchalant and barely discussed, as the majority of the conversation was surrounding the upcoming trial. Nothing in our conversation prepared us for the next steps. Sunday night, we received an email that sent us scrambling. We immediately jumped into panic mode and started making phone calls and sending emails. We met with the prosecution again today to reiterate our views on pushing for the death penalty. Unfortunately, all of our efforts did not matter. We did our best. We fought harder than anyone could ever imagine. Please do not argue or try to tell us that what we should have done this or that. We gave it 200% for the last 2 years and 7 months. One day we will tell you all what we have really been through from day one. You will all be shocked. We fought a long battle, but we lost the war. Now, what I do think is a fact with the law is no one is ever completely happy, and even if you get justice, you can't bring the victims back. I do think what is likely the case here is that other family members were consulted as well, and they probably felt differently. And so if there were a majority, if 3 of the 4 victims' families said, we accept the plea deal, probably the prosecutors went with that and probably would have felt justified. According to legal analyst Phil Holloway, this is taken from Newsweek, but quoting from what he said on X, the evidence against Kohberger is overwhelming. If they cut this deal without the blessing of the families of the victims, these prosecutors should be run out of town. It's funny, I first read that to mean cutting the deal without the blessing of Kohberger's family, which appears to be what happened. But I think these sorts of deals can only be reached one-on-one without getting too emotional, and certainly too many cooks would spoil the broth in this case. It would be triggering for Kohberger as well to hear about the fury of family members, when I think it was his own fury at being sidelined the way he felt he was that compelled him to commit these crimes. So what this really means is no blockbuster trial and the implosion of many in true crime's wettest dreams. All of the cottage industries that were setting up for the trial have now been put asunder. Meanwhile, in a follow-up post, Aaron Berg reacted to the Gonzalez family's post, writing, I hope the Idaho prosecutors have a good explanation, because you never want your victims' families to feel like this. Well, as I say, what about the other victims' families? Were they consulted? What did they say? Retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, she followed this case closely, said that she had mixed feelings about this deal. I actually don't have mixed feelings. I think this is the best outcome, not for me, not for true crime, but for the community that has been victimized here. I would normally say that justice should not merely be done, but seen to be done, but I don't think it applies in this case, where the interest is so gratuitous, and so much so that the university tore down the house where this horrific crime took place. I haven't seen that in a long time. Also from Newsweek, legal analyst and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, Niema Ramani, am I saying that right, said via email, the Kohberger plea is a huge win for Ann Taylor and the defense team. There was overwhelming evidence of his guilt, including his DNA on the knife sheath, cell site evidence on the night, video surveillance of his white Hyundai Elantra, and Amazon search and purchase history of the murder weapon. There was no possibility of him being acquitted, and the judge last week denying the lawyers the opportunity to put on evidence of the purported real killers meant there was no real defense left in the case. That's aside from him arguing autism or other mitigation at sentencing. I've got to say, I don't see it as a huge win for the defense at all. I see it as a win for the prosecutors. The prosecutors did have a winnable case, certainly, but at closer inspection, it gets messy, especially when one brings in the survivors. And let's face it, jurors don't always get even the more obvious cases right. Legal analysts also reacted to the news, like former Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Arenberg. He said the following: "Whenever I did interviews on the Bryan Kohberger case, I would receive lots of comments from delusional Kohberger fans who insisted he was innocent. Where are they now? On to the next conspiracy. If nothing else, this plea deal should put paid to all of that nonsense." Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.